Recent reports circulating through international media suggest that North Korea has signaled strong diplomatic support for Iran amid rising regional tensions. While official statements remain carefully worded, the message coming from Pyongyang is clear. North Korea is watching the situation closely. And if Iran faces military pressure, Pyongyang may not remain silent. This kind of signaling matters in geopolitics, because public statements from leaders like Kim Jong-un are rarely accidental. They are meant to communicate deterrence. They are meant to send a message not only to allies, but also to adversaries. And that message is simple. Iran may not stand alone. To understand why this matters, we need to look at history. Iran and North Korea have maintained strategic ties for decades. These ties have primarily focused on missile technology, military research, defense cooperation. Throughout the 1990s and early 2000s, intelligence reports from multiple countries suggested that North Korea helped Iran develop parts of its ballistic missile program. Some of Iran's early missile systems share design similarities with North Korean models. While both governments deny extensive cooperation, defense analysts have long observed technical overlaps between the two countries' missile programs. This doesn't necessarily mean they are formal military allies, but it does suggest something important. They share strategic interests. So why would North Korea support Iran in a conflict? The answer lies in global strategy. North Korea views international politics through the lens of deterrence and survival. From Pyongyang's perspective, Iran faces similar pressures from Western powers. Supporting Iran, even diplomatically, sends a signal that nations under pressure from global sanctions are not isolated. It creates a network of political support. And more importantly, it complicates strategic calculations for the United States and its allies. Because if tensions escalate in the Middle East while North Korea simultaneously increases activity in East Asia, military planners must divide their attention. This is what analysts call strategic distraction, and it can significantly change the balance of power during crises. One of the biggest concerns among defense analysts involves missile technology. North Korea has invested heavily in missile development. Over the past decade, it has tested intercontinental ballistic missiles, submarine-launched ballistic missiles, hypersonic glide systems. Iran, meanwhile, has built one of the largest missile arsenals in the Middle East. If cooperation between these two programs expands, it could accelerate technological progress for both countries. This doesn't necessarily mean direct military intervention, but even technical collaboration can shift strategic balance in important ways. If North Korea openly supports Iran in a regional conflict, the international response would be immediate. The United States would likely increase military readiness across multiple regions. South Korea and Japan would monitor North Korean military movements closely. NATO members would evaluate how the situation affects global security commitments. China and Russia, both major geopolitical players, would also face strategic decisions about how to respond diplomatically. The situation could rapidly transform from a regional crisis into a broader geopolitical standoff. Beyond military implications, there is an economic dimension. The Middle East plays a central role in global energy supply. Any escalation involving Iran risks disrupting key shipping routes like the Strait of Hormuz. Nearly a fifth of the world's oil passes through that narrow corridor. Even small disruptions can send energy prices rising. Higher oil prices affect transportation, manufacturing, food production, and global inflation. This means a geopolitical crisis could quickly translate into economic consequences felt around the world. So where does this leave us? Kim Jong-un's signal of support for Iran does not automatically mean North Korea will enter a war. But it does highlight something important about modern geopolitics. Conflicts today rarely stay contained within one region. Alliances, technology transfers, economic pressure, and diplomatic signaling connect events across continents. What begins as a regional dispute can quickly evolve into a global strategic confrontation. And that is why analysts across the world are paying attention. Because the real question is not just whether Iran faces pressure. The real question is how many nations might become involved if tensions escalate. And that is a question with consequences far beyond any single battlefield. Before any country chooses war, military planners study something called the battlefield equation. It is not about emotions. It is not about speeches. It is about capabilities, geography, and consequences. And when analysts examine the military reality of Iran, one conclusion appears again and again. Iran would be one of the most difficult countries in the world to defeat militarily. Why? First, geography. Iran is not Iraq. Iran is not Afghanistan. Iran is a vast country of mountains, deserts, and strategic choke points. Its terrain is naturally defensive. Military forces invading Iran would face thousands of kilometers of rugged mountains and difficult terrain. Second, missile capability. Iran has built one of the largest missile programs in the Middle East. These missiles can reach U.S. military bases across the region, Israeli cities, strategic infrastructure, and many are stored in underground facilities. Third, asymmetric warfare. Iran's military doctrine is based on a strategy called asymmetric warfare. This means Iran does not need to defeat its enemies in a traditional battlefield. Instead, it focuses on disrupting supply lines, targeting military bases, attacking naval forces, supporting allied groups in the region. This strategy dramatically increases the cost of war for any attacker. Fourth, regional networks. Iran has developed alliances and partnerships across the Middle East. These relationships mean that if a major war started, the conflict could quickly expand into multiple fronts. Instead of one battlefield, the region could face a network of conflicts. Another critical factor rarely explained in headlines is the Strait of Hormuz. This narrow waterway connects the Persian Gulf to the global ocean, and it carries around 20% of the world's oil supply. Let that sink in. 1/5 of global oil passes through this tiny stretch of water. Iran sits directly along this strategic corridor. If war broke out and the Strait of Hormuz became unstable or blocked, the consequences could be immediate. Oil prices could surge overnight. Global markets could panic. Energy shortages could ripple through economies worldwide. Countries thousands of kilometers away would suddenly feel the shock. In modern geopolitics, energy security is global security, and any disruption in this region would be felt across continents. War is not just fought with tanks and aircraft. It is also fought with economic consequences. A conflict involving Iran would likely trigger rising oil prices, stock market instability, supply chain disruptions, global inflation. Businesses depend on predictable trade routes and stable energy supplies. When war disrupts those systems, the economic damage spreads far beyond the battlefield. For ordinary people, that could mean higher fuel prices, higher food prices, economic uncertainty. History has shown that even regional wars can have global economic effects. Despite tensions, diplomacy remains one of the most powerful tools in international relations. Negotiations are rarely perfect. They often involve compromise and patience. But they exist because the alternative, war, is often far worse. In the past, diplomatic agreements have slowed or reduced tensions between major rivals. International negotiations involving Iran have attempted to address issues such as nuclear development, sanctions, and regional security. These diplomatic efforts have sometimes succeeded and sometimes failed, but they demonstrate something important. Even during intense disagreements, countries often prefer talking to fighting. Because once war begins, controlling its outcome becomes extremely difficult. History offers many lessons about war. One of the most important lessons is that wars often start with confidence, but end with regret. Before major conflicts begin, leaders sometimes believe war will be quick, decisive, and manageable, but reality rarely follows those expectations. Consider the conflicts of the last 2 decades. Many began with predictions of short campaigns, yet they lasted for years, sometimes decades. The human and economic costs far exceeded the original expectations. This is why historians often caution that the decision to start a war is one of the most serious choices any government can make. In modern conflicts, the battlefield is not only physical, it is also informational. Media narratives shape how the public understands global events. Different outlets present different interpretations of the same situation. Some emphasize threats. Others emphasize diplomacy. Some highlight military strength. Others highlight humanitarian consequences. For viewers and citizens, this creates a challenge. How do we understand complex geopolitical events when information comes from so many directions? The most responsible approach is to examine multiple sources, perspectives, and historical contexts. Critical thinking becomes essential, because geopolitical issues rarely have simple explanations. If tensions between major powers escalate, the consequences extend beyond regional politics. Global alliances could become involved. International organizations would face enormous pressure. Diplomatic relationships could shift dramatically. The world today is interconnected in ways that did not exist decades ago. Trade, technology, energy, and security are deeply linked. This means that major conflicts rarely remain isolated. They ripple outward. Behind every geopolitical headline are real human lives. Soldiers, civilians, families, and communities are affected by conflict. Infrastructure can be destroyed. Cities can be damaged. Generations can feel the consequences long after wars end. This human dimension is often overlooked when conflicts are discussed in purely strategic terms. But it is perhaps the most important factor of all, because every war ultimately impacts ordinary people. Today, the world faces a moment of geopolitical uncertainty. Tensions exist between multiple powers. Regional conflicts remain unresolved. And global competition between nations is intensifying. In such moments, the decisions of leaders become extremely important. Choices made in government offices can shape the future of entire regions. This is why international dialogue, diplomacy, and restraint remain essential tools in maintaining global stability. So what happens next? That question does not have a simple answer. International politics is constantly evolving. Diplomatic negotiations continue. Strategic alliances shift. Economic pressures change. What is clear, however, is that the choices made today will influence the global landscape for years to come. Will diplomacy prevail? Will tensions de-escalate? Or will rivalry intensify? The future of the Middle East, and perhaps global stability, may depend on those answers. As global citizens and informed viewers, understanding these issues requires patience and careful analysis. Complex geopolitical conflicts cannot be reduced to simple slogans. They involve history, strategy, economics, and human consequences. And that is why discussions like this matter, because informed audiences help create informed societies. Thank you for watching Newsix Brief. If you found this analysis valuable, consider subscribing and joining us for more deep-dive global news analysis. Stay informed, stay curious, and we'll see you in the next briefing.